of the inquiry. Before we do continue, I've been reviewing programming overnight, and I'm assuming I'm not the only one becoming concerned about the almost glacial-like progress that we're making in cross-examination. By my reckoning, it's taken us 6 and a bit days to take 3 of the appellant's witnesses. We've got 6 of the appellant's witnesses left, with notionally 3 days or so to take them in. Any comments on that? Are the parties still confident that we're likely to conclude within the 6 weeks? Mr. Steele, I know you haven't really been responsible up to now, although you might well be in the coming weeks, but any comments?
Well, sir, I certainly hope I haven't been in any way responsible up to now, and I hope to continue that way, sir. And I shudder at the thought that you call my cross-examination glacial, because I'll be doing everything I can to avoid any such description. I don't know, sir. I never anticipated being with this witness towards the end of the second week. Every arrangement I've made to have witnesses here has had to be altered. So I think that says it all. I'm entirely in the hands of others, sir. Although I do say this, I do wonder whether there has been any repetition in cross-examination, and I do, with the greatest respect to all of my learned friends, wonder whether all of the cross-examination was completely necessary. But that's a matter for them and for you, sir. I have not objected because maybe you found it helpful, but I can say no more.
Thanks, Mr. Steele. Mr. Thompson.
While I would like to be eternally optimistic, I can see the force of what's been happening, and it does seem as if we continue at the present rate of progress, all our timetables are going to slip. I don't know. I had thought that we would speed up as we got on, and we may still do so over the remainder of the appellant's witnesses. That's my hope. But the more one looks at what they've got to say, I suspect that may be more optimistic than realistic.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Mackay.
Sir, you'll understand that the principal witnesses, so far as the HES is concerned in relation to the appellant's position, are Ms Tweedy and Mr Wright, and that's why I have cross-examined each of those witnesses at length. I don't intend to be very long with the other witnesses as presently advised. It does strike me, though, sir, that if I'm right to describe Ms Tweedy and Mr Wright as the principal witnesses, now that they've given evidence, part of that involved reading their precognitions and any rebuttal precognitions. I do wonder whether that's something that could be reviewed, because we do spend quite a bit of time doing that exercise. It takes about 20 minutes, half an hour, sometimes a bit longer than that, even if there's a rebuttal precognition. And given the number of witnesses that are still to give evidence on this session, it might be that if we all took those precognitions as read, or at least just to ask them to summarise key aspects of the precognitions, we could save quite a considerable period of time. That's something to consider, sir.
Thanks for that. That's helpful. Ms Coburn.
Yes, thank you, sir. You probably don't notice this, but you'll see those of us sitting at this end of the table scoring things out as we get there. So, for example, I didn't have any questions to ask of Mr Maskell because I felt that the issues had been dealt with very well by Mr Thompson and by Mr Mackay. So I'm not sure necessarily that I agree wholeheartedly with Mr Steele's comments. That said, like Mr Mackay said, from the perspective of those instructing me, the most important witness was Mr Wright. And that was always going to be thus. In terms of the cross-examination that I have for the remainder of the witnesses, I have nothing for Mr Collins. I suspect I will have nothing for Professor Taverner, possibly nothing for Professor Murray, and some questions perhaps for Mr Gibbs. So we don't see any particular difficulty with this next part of the appellant's witnesses speeding up and quite considerably, but you'll understand that's only from our perspective, sir. It takes no account of what other parties might be thinking.
Thanks for that.
So at this table, there has been a certain amount of burden sharing, and we're trying. I certainly have been crossing things out when Ms Coburn has said them, and sometimes not writing them down at all, knowing she will say them. I am concerned about duplication, and I still remain a little confused about why we need two professors of architecture to address issue 2. But that's a matter for Mr. Steele. But I think we will speed up. I hope we will speed up. I have no questions for Mr. Van Grieken, and I'm at the moment thinking I probably have no questions for Mr. Collins either. But clearly the advice given, or said to have been given, by those instructing me to the appellants many years ago was put in issue in the appellant's appeal statement, and I feel obliged to address it in cross. If it hadn't been put in issue in the appeal statement, I might not even be here.
Okay, thanks for that. Mr. Innes.
I think I would endorse the view that the heritage issues are at the core of this case, and we've had two separate witnesses largely dealing with those heritage matters. As a consequence, various different interests have cross-examined in slightly different ways, respecting those interests. Insofar as the subsequent witnesses are, I anticipate being very limited time with any of the architectural witnesses, and Mr. Gibbs largely points to clarification rather than matters which I wish to extend across on. I do have some questions for Mr. Collins, but I don't think that's going to take very long. And I will have questions from Mr. Van Grieken, because I'm obviously leading a landscape witness, and therefore it's been agreed largely that it would be appropriate that I'll pick up most of the issues on landscape matters. So we are trying, but I think on these first large heritage topics, everyone has a slightly different interest.
That's understood. Thanks for that. You haven't been responsible at all, Mrs. Nimble, but is there anything that you want to add? Nothing to add? No. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, I don't think there's much point in saying much more on it. From our perspective, we haven't really detected any true duplication or repetition in cross-examination, but at times it can feel to us a bit like variations on a theme. So, we would just ask you to bear that in mind as we move forward. So, hopefully your appearances will soon be over, Ms. Tweedy. Mr. Innes, you were continuing with cross-examination.
And in order to speed matters up, I've liaised with the appellants, and we have the various documents available to speed matters up. So we're at CD 180, viewpoint 27A. Now, Ms. Tweedy, in terms of the base photograph, that shows the end of the lodge, and we've been around the lodge, and obviously it's a matter for site inspection as to whether or not the temple can be seen both from if you're either further west or further east of the lodge in terms of that. I don't want to go over that because that's not helpful. So we've got the lodge. You knock the lodge down, and it reveals effectively in this particular 27A the temple. Do we see that?
Yes,
yeah.
That's true.
And that is one of the benefits of the scheme as you see as regards setting relative to the high school. Is that correct?
Yes.
And insofar as that view is revealed, do you accept that the view will essentially be a glimpsed one on a journey rather than an extensive and sustained view?
If your journey is around Regent Road,
yes.
Then yes.
Yeah. And insofar as there will be a downside to a benefit, one of the downsides from this particular perspective is that effectively, whilst you've revealed essentially the central part of the Hamilton building, the western elevation in this particular viewpoint is not visible, and indeed the way in which the hotel has been located essentially blocks all views, even of its north facade. Is that correct? The north facade of the western elevation, or the western part of the building. That was wrong, not the elevation, the western part of the building.
Yes, that's correct,
yes.
But they're also not visible in the current baseline
yes.
either.
But that's not a benefit you're claiming from this particular scheme, i.e. it's not revealed. It's only the central part of the temple that is revealed, correct?
Yes.
And insofar as other matters are concerned, we now have also the scale and massing of this new building. Would you accept from this particular view that the scale and massing appear to give the building a larger profile than that of the temple?
Yes.
Yeah. And anything, shall we say, to the south of the temple is now physically blocked from being capable of being seen by the hotel. Is that correct?
The boundary wall and railings remain visible, but the rest of the Hamilton building is no longer visible.
So just to be clear, that whole view shed from there to which the hotel occupies to the Hamilton building essentially will be lost. So we will not be able to experience the western elevation right down all the area that the hotel occupies. Is that correct?
From this location, yes.
Now, the other aspect I just want to come to is this, as I understand it in view terms, is the only view I get of the eastern block of the hotel, other than the ones that we talked about in terms of, remember we stopped at 35 at the bus stop, looked back and saw the eastern block. This is the eastern block coming into play again here, and that's the only other view. This is the only view we have, isn't it? From that arc.
We have other views in Waterloo Place.
Yes. But I don't think that's of the Eastern Hotel.
I beg your pardon, I have East and West confused again.
Yes. I'm looking at the far block. That's all I can see. And can we see from that, first of all, compared to the baseline, something has gone on the path on the way up the hill, in the sense of it's not the same. Something's happened to the photomontage. And if you, helpfully, in the photomontage that's been the photomontage where the buildings have been added into, do we see that some people appear to have been photomontaged into the pathway? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And roughly at the people, with my magnifying glass, something appears to have happened to be added in. And it's not quite clear what's proposed there, but there seems to be something coming across the path in terms of the people that have been photoshopped in. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Innes, these photoshopped people, are they on Carlton Hill Drive?
Yes.
Yes.
You'll need a magnifying glass, as I have, to see it. But there does appear to be people that have been photomontaged into the image.
So can I just be clear, what else, apart from the people that have been photobombed into it, what else is it said that's there?
Well, my version of this photomontage, immediately around the people, seems to have a sort of half-circular development profile coming across Carlton Hill Drive.
So it seems to have a what?
It seems to be almost the east wing seems to have developed an additional extension, which seems to have almost come across and into Carlton Hill Drive. And I don't know whether this might be something that's arisen from some aspect of the photomontage going a bit awry, but there seems to be something awry there.
Is that above the fence line?
No, it's to the left and also seems to cross the fence line. The two people, if you go just to the right of the two people in the photomontage, there seems to be something in the image that I have that is not the walkway.
I can see that there's a change in colour. The resolution of this image is not good enough for me to give you any further information, I'm afraid.
So, insofar as what we can see, we'll just have to Mr. Van Grieken, no doubt, will be able to explain what's happened here. He will have an understanding of what's happened. But insofar as we see that eastern hotel block, do we see it clearly sitting above, in height terms, the eastern elevation of the main block of the Hamilton building?
Yes, it sits just above the east wing.
And just for, because I know how much you adore the gymnasium, I think the gymnasium is seen in the baseline photograph just to the left. Do we see, you can just get a glimpsed view of the gymnasium, do we see?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's quite helpful in giving us an indication, perhaps, of the future scale and massing of the eastern hotel block as we travel eastwards, because we at least have some indication of how much larger the scale and massing is compared to what we see of the gymnasium. That gives us an indication, doesn't it?
Yes, the scale is also to do with the location of the new wing compared to the gymnasium. They're not located in the same position.
Yeah. And we'll come back to take a trip later, but if we move on to 27B, please. Can we see from 27B, both the baseline, we can see the outline of the eastern wing of the Hamilton building. Do we see that?
Sorry, the east or the west?
Where it's west.
You could attempt to find it among the trees, yes.
Yeah. And insofar as the PSA planted some trees that most people accept are probably a little inappropriate, if this were a private developer and they planted some trees adjacent to their Grade A listed building, how far do you think they'd get in an argument that they could justify a very large extension to the listed building because the facade couldn't be seen because they planted a hedge or some trees? How do you think that would play as an argument, Ms. Tweedy?
It would depend on the nature of the hedge and how long it had been present.
Yeah. So if those trees were partially removed, would you agree that the western elevation of the Hamilton building would be prominent and visible from this particular location?
It would be visible. I'm not sure about prominent.
Can we equally agree that the area occupied by the hotel in this particular viewpoint would preclude us being even able to experience that element of the setting of the Royal High School?
Yes, from this location.
So that is loss of experience, loss of view. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that loss would also extend to the extent from this view shed that the hotel occupied on site as well.
It would no longer be able to see it within the site where the new wing is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if I was standing right in the middle of the car park and looking east, that's something I will not be able to do going forward, and that will equally be a loss of the ability to experience the Hamilton building in relatively close proximity from the west.
Yes. Although, again, you can't do that currently.
And equally, that would equally apply to the east as well, wouldn't it? From the playgrounds between the various buildings as it stands. I would not be able to, in terms of if the new development proceeds, I would also lose that ability to be able to appreciate the setting from the east at relatively close proximity.
You would lose that ability from particular locations. It's still possible to appreciate each facade from other locations, so it's not completely removing that ability.
We go to 27C, again, perhaps more of the western facade revealed, and again, that ability to experience that element of setting is now no longer capable of being experienced, is it? It's a loss of that ability to experience the setting from that location.
Yes.
and it only gets returned to us at 27D. Yes.
Yes.
And insofar as we were at 27D, we would obviously, with the way this image is presented, we're not perhaps faced with what's immediately to our left, which might be a fairly large four-storey hotel building. That's the context of the hotel's been cut off, but it's going to be to my left as I look round at the western facade. Do you accept that?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, could we perhaps go to viewpoint 32A from CD 31, which is Scheme 1. Yeah, and if we go to viewpoint 32A to start with, in terms of 32A, it's the view from Carlton Hill Drive looking southwest, and as I understand the series of viewpoints, is effectively I travel down Carlton Hill Drive, but not really looking to my left. I just carry on looking forward. Is that a fair description of the viewpoints?
Yes.
Yeah. And if we go to 32A, the photomontage, do we see on our left, skulking in the trees, the hotel wing east?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, that might be, again, a helpful indicator of the relative height that we're seeing from there relative to, I think we can see the corner of the east wing of the Hamilton building. Can we see that?
Yes.
Yeah. So what we're seeing is the height and the scale, but not very much, and that's about all we can see at this point. Now, if we travel down the hill, I know the next viewpoint, 32B, is only at the bottom, and 32C is at the bottom. We don't have a viewpoint from what Mr. Steele has been described as the viewing platform, do we? From behind the Hamilton building to the north of the central part of the portico. We don't have a viewpoint from there, do we?
No.
And if we had a viewpoint from there, are you aware that we have made continuous objection on the basis of a lack of a viewpoint from there, and equally that's been maintained through the inquiry process? Are you aware of that?
I believe it was mentioned earlier in the proceedings.
And insofar as that viewpoint is concerned, if we're at the back of the portico, there are a number of things that will potentially be visible. First of all, there will be the eastern hotel wing off to the east. Yes? And all indications are that it's going to look quite big in the east. Does that be fair to say, given that viewpoint 27A and the image that we've just seen? It's going to look quite large, isn't it?
Quite large is a rather relative term for me to agree to.
Well, it's not going to be small, is it?
It's not small, no.
No. And I think, again, whilst we don't have an image, we have to do what we can with what we have, and it looks like it's going to be pretty large, and it's going to be infilling in a way in which the current gymnasium doesn't, much further south in terms of its scale and massing. Is that correct?
It occupies a different location from the gymnasium, so it's filling a different space.
And equally, I'll have views of the portico, and I'll have views equally of the new hotel wing to the west. So all those will potentially be in view, yes?
Yes, not the portico. That's on the south.
But insofar as the other aspects are concerned, we also don't have a visualization of what the other add-ons are going to look like from that key central view. And what I'm talking about here is all the various glass and the wraps, etc., round the various facades. We don't have a picture of that in an authorised viewpoint, do we?
No.
And what proportion of the whole site, from keeping to this north elevation, what proportion of the whole site, if I were walking from the end, i.e. starting at the West Wing Hotel right to the end of the East Wing Hotel, what proportion of that is glass in terms of coverage?
I would need to consult a drawing to answer that question.
There's a drawing that Mr. Gibb has produced in his inquiry statement that might be quite helpful to you. And if you go to the inquiry report,
PPP 41.
yes,
Thank you.
page 42, sorry.
Yes, I have that.
Yeah. And have you got page 42?
Yes.
Yeah. So insofar, is it perhaps easier in terms of the whole elevation to say what won't have glass in it? Would that be an easy way of expressing it? There'll be parts of the northern facade of the west wing, as illustrated here, that isn't caught by the wrap. That will be not covered in glass. We will have the end of the temple, whilst not covered, we'll have new doors put in, but it's not going to have a glass around it. And then we'll obviously have the eastern arrangement replicated there. But all other aspects are going to be one continuous glass and bronze structure, isn't it, of some kind or another?
It's difficult to answer that question from this concept sketch. It's not an accurate drawing, so I wouldn't like to answer from this drawing.
Would you like to look at CD 272? And that might help otherwise. I just thought it was very easily put there, but if you want to look at CD 272.
So would it be possible to have the lights turned on? Because it's beginning to get a little gloomy. I mean, it may be brighter over on Mr. Steele's table, but I think over here we'd like some more light if possible.
Yes, personally I'm not going to do that, but someone should feel free to locate light switches and turn them on. Perfect, thank you.
Does that help you any further, Ms. Tweedy, in terms of how that's all going to look?
Yes.
Yeah. So, coming from the west and travelling along, I'll pass the hotel wings, then I'll meet this particular array to get into the northern facade of the, essentially the western part of the Hamilton building. I'll then get a bit of stone and then more glass, and then we get the end of the temple, and then this is replicated in the opposite way all the way to the end. Is that correct?
That appears to be the case, yes.
So certainly in character, this is certainly going to be a pretty 21st century character, isn't it? All these introductions are going to mould together to alter the character of the this whole northern elevation, isn't it?
Yes, there will be 20th or 21st century additions, I should say.
Yeah.
Although the original building is, in a sense, largely unchanged beyond that.
Okay. Thank you. And I want to to just keep with the Hamilton building and move on to the Belvedere and the retaining walls. First of all, can you describe, have you seen any visual images, say, coming out of the reception area in Hostel Scheme 2 and turning east, and understanding what it would actually look like? What would be the relationship between the retaining walls and the new hotel structure in the east? Can you picture it in your mind as to what it would look like?
My understanding is that there is a gap between the retaining wall and the wing, and I believe I've seen some, I'm not sure of the technical term, some 3D modelling on the computer of this. I'm not sure what the technical term that an architect would use for that kind of drawing is, but hopefully that helps you understand what I mean.
It understands what I mean, but I'm not sure, is that before the inquiry? And if so, could you perhaps point to it? Because you perhaps have a significant advantage in having seen something that actually visualises the retaining wall and its relationship with the eastern wing of the hotel.
I believe some of these details may be covered in the evidence of Professor Taverner.
Okay. Could we at least agree that, based on the visual information that's before us, that the hotel in the eastern section, if I'm standing to the east, say 20 metres east of the entrance, is going to look like a fairly large and dominant feature in views to the east? Can we at least agree that?
The new wing will be an element in that view, yes.
And we get some image here, and again, I'm sure it will come with your caveat that even if we're looking at 272, the architects have been let loose, and we shouldn't necessarily say that they've been verified in the manner which, say, a photomontage has been. They're images.
Yes,
Yeah.
Indeed, this appears to be taken from someone floating in the air rather than on the pavement.
Exactly. Now, when we get to the Belvedere, obviously that's through this corridor, northern corridor, if we call it. I don't know what it looks like. You obviously have. I'm having to envisage it. But the northern corridor, because of the vegetation, the Belvedere is only going to really be revealed right at the end of the corridor, isn't it? We discussed this with Mr. Wright.
I don't have a detailed knowledge of the vegetation plan. The landscape architect would be better qualified.
Good. I'll raise that with Mr. Van Grieken. Insofar as the Belvedere is concerned, could we now have Mr. Van Grieken's visualizations? CD 596. And we're going to viewpoint 8C. Again, I think you've been taken here before. But the first viewpoint I want you to look at is viewpoint 8C04. And that is the 2015 scheme in full glory. Yes?
Yes.
And in that particular, are you aware of discussions that were undertaken with Mr. Van Grieken about the preparation of these images?
I was present in some meetings where they were mentioned, yes.
Mm-hmm. And was it discussed that in these images there should be an attempt to try and reveal the Belvedere Tower and its visibility within them?
No. My memory of the meeting was discussing the need to comply with the LVIA guidance.
Nothing about the Belvedere Tower or any cultural heritage matters?
No, they were prepared for the landscape witness.
Can you explain why in this image, when we know that Scheme 1 doesn't go as far east as Scheme 2, why the Belvedere Tower is not in this image or visible?
So surely that's a question for Mr. Van Grieken in due course. I was going to say early course, but in due course.
I would have thought so, but Ms Tweedy will say whether or not she can answer the question.
I don't feel able to answer that question. I didn't prepare the visualisations and I don't have the appropriate knowledge.
Okay. But if we see in the next image, viewpoint 8C05, we see part of a Belvedere tower revealed, and that's reflective of the fact, as we've dealt with before, that in terms of Scheme 2 it's moved further east, and now we have essentially the eastern edge of the hotel development coming down part of the Belvedere Tower. Is that correct?
That is what's shown in the visualisation.
Yeah. And it's a top half of the tower that's visible. Is that correct? The top, possibly less than a half of the tower that's visible.
Yes, some is screened by trees.
Yeah. And if we go forward to viewpoint 10, and go to viewpoint 04, that gives us an indication that in the previous viewpoint we only saw half, isn't it? Because if we go to photograph 218, viewpoint 1004, we see there that in the 2015 scheme, we see the Belvedere Tower standing alone and separate from the scheme. And when we return to the next page in viewpoint 5, the Belvedere Tower again is sitting right on the edge and is being partially obscured by the development. Do we see that?
I would suggest very little of the Belvedere is obscured in viewpoint 1005.
Well, can we agree, perhaps this one, can we agree that in terms of viewpoint 04, that at least the Belvedere Tower is given some setting, in terms of it has some space and we can see it defined and it is in part articulated. Do we see that?
Yes.
And insofar as if we go to viewpoint 5, that the position is less clear-cut, and it certainly seems to me that part of the Belvedere Tower appears to have some glass and bronze perhaps in front of it. I have the benefit of a magnifying glass, Ms Tweedy, so it may be just seeing things.
There may be a very small sliver missing, but it certainly doesn't appear to be a lot without my magnifying glass.
But which would be better from the Belvedere Tower's perspective, Scheme 1 or Scheme 2 from this viewpoint, in setting terms?
Purely considering the Belvedere Tower, the Scheme 1 has slightly more space, and it's possible to understand its connection to the retaining wall.
Yeah. If there was some retaining wall visible, would that be even better?
There is a small part of the retaining wall visible in Scheme 1.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why it's got an improved setting. Is that correct, compared to Scheme 2?
Yes, if we were to assess this small element of setting.
Would it be fair to say that, do you think it's more in these viewpoints that the Belvedere was constructed to be seen from? It was part of a wider architectural design to be appreciated from longer distance views?
I think the nature of the design of the site is so that it could be appreciated both in near-distance views and long-distance views.
Now, I think I unfairly cut you off yesterday in cross-examination at one point, and I want to address the balance, if I may. We were asking, I asked various questions about what you might be able to see through the gap between the lower pavilion and the western or the eastern section of the Hamilton building. We had quite a heated exchange, and you said there were perhaps other viewpoints that would help illustrate the matter. I spent some time overnight, and I was just going to put to you, my first thought was to go to viewpoint 19, but I didn't think it was particularly fair, because if I look at Mr. Van Grieken's images, they didn't really disclose the visibility of the gymnasium particularly well, so that wasn't fitting as a particularly good reference point. But I did have a look in Scheme 2, and if you want to have a look at viewpoint 24, was the one I thought was perhaps fairest from your perspective in the context of that particular matter. And before finishing on the high school, I just wanted to take you perhaps to viewpoint 24 and CD 180, please.
Viewpoint 24.
Yes. Have you got viewpoint 24?
Yes, I do.
And if I look at the base photograph, and looking at the area which I was discussing with you, in that particular photograph, the gymnasium entirely fills the space which we were talking about. Do you see that?
Yes, it does.
So in that viewpoint, essentially what we're replacing is slightly yellowy building with your new building, with, and of course in this context it's been wire-framed in the actual, because this is a wireframe, not a photomontage.
Yes.
Yeah. And what we see in viewpoint 24 is a building that is about 25% higher than the gymnasium was.
Yes.
One of the reasons why that is that we may get to all sorts of discussions about what things may be in spot heights, but when you move the volume and massing forward, i.e. southwards in the context of this particular view, that then impacts about the skylining and the height that it occupies above, doesn't it? So it's not just about height when we're looking at this, it's also the scale and massing of bringing forward the built development further south. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, although I would note that this viewpoint is considerably changed. I think if anyone visits this location today, it's considerably different from this due to a large amount of development that's occurring behind the delightfully decorated boards in the image.
Those occupiers will enjoy that particular view, no doubt. But can we be agreed that from this particular viewpoint, the Eastern Hotel utterly overwhelms the lower pavilions and wrapping around it in a manner that is utterly contrary to the design intentions of Mr. Hamilton?
Mr. Hamilton did not intend a building to be located there. I wouldn't agree that it overwhelms or dominates. I think it's very easy to read the difference between the... admittedly, we can't see that in this image because it's a wireframe, but the materials will mean that it's very straightforward to understand the difference between the elements.
This is one of the fundamental differences that we have between us, is that you say as long as I can read the difference, it doesn't matter. And I'm suggesting to you, absolutely it does matter, that you're interfering with key design iterations of the Hamilton building, which are carefully located buildings for particularly desired effect. The fact that I can spot how you've caused the damage doesn't negate the damage, does it?
I wouldn't say this damages your ability to understand why it's been placed in this way, and that's what I'm assessing. I'm assessing the experience, appreciation and understanding. And in this particular viewpoint, it remains possible to do all of those things.
And I suppose that actually brings this to an absolute head that unless I built in front of this development, as long as it was legible, you would be defending that there was no significant effect on setting, wouldn't you? That's what this comes to, effectively.
We could have a lengthy discussion about things which would cause a significant effect. I'm not sure that's going to help us much.
Okay. In terms of other matters on setting, could we just close off the Royal High School? Okay. I want to go back to the close-in views. The landscape architects before this inquiry are agreed on where the likely significant effects, at a minimum, are going to occur. They've assessed negative, significant, adverse visual effect at viewpoints 35, 21 and 32. So, essentially those to the south, but also extending to the north. It's agreed by the landscape architects that those views are adverse and significant. Now, I can understand how you can come back at me and say that assessment is different. Yes, it is in terms of the sensitivity of the receptor, because they're assessing people and you're assessing a building. But they're assessing the exact same thing when they're looking at the magnitude of change. They're looking to what visual change is occurring in the image that's being presented for them. And in the context of what they're looking at, it's the building. Yes?
No, sir, I would disagree with that. If you consult my assessment, you will see that I have to understand the reasons why an asset has been designated and the elements of its setting which contribute to that. So I am not assessing just the visual change. I'm assessing how it is affecting our ability to understand, appreciate and experience. They are not entirely the same thing.
I appreciate in carrying out an overall assessment of setting, there may be additional points to add in. But as the guidance says, the visual impact of the proposed change relative to the scale of the historic asset is a matter of the things that has to be assessed. That's the same magnitude of change that has been undertaken in the visual change, where the visualizations are directed at the same matter, the building, the site. That's what we're assessing in terms of that visual change.
I think that's not the case. I think I've already explained that in my previous answer, so I don't want to repeat myself again.
And Mr. Van Grieken has helpfully given us some advice in relation to the landscape context. He finds that the development of the western section is such that, in his opinion, there are significant adverse landscape effects arising from the proposals. And that's his professional opinion on the impact of landscape context. So, do you disagree with him?
I'm not qualified to comment on a landscape assessment. That's not my profession.
If you're not prepared to comment on landscape assessment, how come you've carried out a baseline assessment of the current landscape or townscape context?
Again, I'm carrying out a different assessment. Landscape context is part of setting. That is not the same as carrying out a landscape assessment. They're two different things.
I now want to move on and discuss another building. I'm only going to discuss one more building, and that is one Regent Terrace, so you understand the context. Have you undertaken an assessment of the impact that the proposals will have on one Regent Terrace?
Yes, sir. I've carried out an assessment of the group of listed buildings of Regent Terrace.
Not the question I asked. Have you undertaken an assessment of the impact of these proposals on one Regent Terrace?
Not on one Regent Terrace as a single asset, no.
is it a Grade A listed building with its own separate listing?
Yes.
Do you agree that as a matter of, well, Mr. Steele, as a matter of law, that in considering this application, or these applications and these appeals, that the ministers will have to give consideration as to whether or not the setting of that particular listed building is preserved or not?
Yes.
Why then, given that it is the closest Grade A listed building to the development, have you not undertaken an assessment of it?
I have undertaken an assessment of it as part of the group with the rest of Regent Terrace. I could have written a separate assessment for all 34 properties, but they would have all largely said the same thing, so I chose to assess them as a group for the sake of people having to read a very lengthy report.
That cannot be accurate, because each of those listed buildings will have their own setting, won't they? So the one towards the west will be more directly and potentially adversely affected than those further to the east, which may have no visibility from their front door and very limited visibility from their garden. That can't be right, can it, Ms. Tweedy?
The change would be experienced to a greater effect the closer you are to the proposed development.
Document CD 253. I'll give you a chance to look at it, Ms. Tweedy.
I have the document.
Now, that's a section from the east showing the hotel, eastern wing of the hotel. And as we see in the centre part of the drawing, there is a statement which says, the extent of the east-facing glazing with frit to obscure views from the bedrooms. And that's outlined or ringed in red. Do we see that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And as I understand it, you will be able to go there, and one of the things that you'll be able to see is roughly the relationship between one Regent Terrace and this, because we've got the railings reference, which can draw a reference to where that actually occurs. But this effectively is going to be the view that the property will have to look up to from its rear. Do you accept that?
Effectively, but we don't have the sense of depth in this view. And again, I feel I'm not quite the right person to address this question, as it's an architect's drawing.
Yes, but can I suggest feelings of being overwhelmed would be the right feeling or evocation from the visual impact that's going to occur in the garden ground at 1 Regent Terrace as a consequence of this proposal?
I would need to consult a plan to understand the relationship more clearly.
Well, clearly you've, as part of your field evaluation, did you not look round and consider that there might be scale issues associated with the development on its eastern flanks relative to cultural heritage assets?
Again, I would re-emphasise I'm assessing the setting of Regent Terrace. That's the ability to understand, experience and appreciate the reasons why that asset was designated. Putting a new element nearby that does not necessarily affect that.
And if I look, for example, at CD 249, again, looking at the relationship between the eastern elevation of the hotel and One Regent Terrace, again, it's fairly straightforward to see the visual impact and the thereby this is going to be, I mean, coming to the front of the building as I approach One Regent Terrace, do I have a view up towards the hotel site?
Yes, that would be an element of your view.
So as I come in or use the garden ground at One Regent Terrace, that is the scale relationship that's going to be evident. And we don't have a view, but 18C is probably the nearest we've got in terms of showing the scale and height of the hotel proposal relative to it. It will engulf the western boundary or the western elevation of One Regent Terrace and will harm and significantly harm the setting of the building, won't it?
You'll see in my ES for Scheme 2 that I've assessed the setting of this building and the rest of the terrace, and I set out there what I understand to be the important elements of the setting. And I would maintain that they are not significantly affected by this. I have that.
Now, if we go to the back of that document at page 10, do we see that one of the matters which you're required to consider in terms of carrying out your evaluation is whether the proposed change would dominate or detract in ways that affects our ability to understand and appreciate the historic asset? Do we see that?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to put it to you, and I know your answer is going to be it doesn't affect your understanding and appreciation. I would suggest that putting a building of this scale at that proximity of the proposed change relative to the scale of the historic asset or its place and setting is completely out of scale, i.e. that was one issue we're going to assess in visual, and clearly it's self-evident from these drawings that it's out of scale.
I think that, again, we need to return to the fact that I'm assessing setting in the round. So my ability to understand the setting of One Regent Terrace is not only based on when I'm standing at the doorway or when I am in the garden of One Regent Terrace. And as a whole, my ability to understand Regent Terrace and the reason why it's been located there, how it complies with Stark's ideals, how it complies with Playfair's layout for the hill, none of those elements are affected by the development, albeit it does introduce a visual change, but it remains entirely possible for me to understand and appreciate why it is laid out in this way.
And I suppose that comes down to your narrow interpretation of setting, which you keep coming back to, which is, what about how the asset is experienced? Is that going to change as a consequence of that scale of development and proximity to it?
It's not the role of a historic environment assessment to understand the experience in the way I think you're intimating. We're not assessing what it is like for a visitor. We're not assessing what it is like for a resident. we're assessing the ability to understand the asset as a historic asset.
Yes, experienced as a historic asset to remove all context of its appropriate setting to the east, to the west, would, I suggest, affect its relationship, fundamental relationship with this terrace, the school, and Carlton Hill, won't it? Because they're all, this is all design landscape. It's the whole thing is featured at this particular location.
With respect, it's not removing its context. It's adding a feature within its context. That's a different thing.
Because I'm going to suggest, Ms. Tweedy, this is a clear example of it is almost impossible, given your test, to find that there will be a significant adverse impact on the setting of any building. Because you set the threshold at a level that simply every change will not or could not meet a threshold test of significance.
No, sir, that's not correct. And indeed, on many occasions, I have assessed significant impacts on assets.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tweedy.
Ms. Nimmo.
Well, fortunately, Mr. Innes has asked several of my questions, but I would just like to take you just to get a fuller understanding. I suspect I will get some of the same answers, but you don't agree there is a relationship between the build of the Thomas Hamilton School and the start of the terrace, Regent Terrace, at 1?
There is a relationship between the buildings because they are all part of the same design. So the design for the Carlton scheme, they all form part of that. So there is a relationship there, yes.
And it was planned by Thomas Hamilton because the terraces were being built. They had been started before the laying stone was put down for the school building.
I believe so. I would need to double-check the chronology to be certain.
So I believe Thomas Hamilton would be very, very aware of exactly where 1 Regent Terrace had its western elevation, and that was part in his mind of where he was putting his building. As simple as that.
Yes, he would be aware of that.
And that the importance between the eastern elevation of the school at that point in time before the gym and the railings, which was his design, and then the western elevation of 1 Regent Terrace, that it was a space and that it was part of the landscape in which he perceived his building.
I believe that Thomas Hamilton intentionally positioned his building centrally within the site to give it prominence, even to make it a dominant feature, particularly in longer distant views. And yes, it's a deliberate choice that he placed it centrally within the site.
And we've been over Rus and Urb and all the rest of it, but those edges were important to that dominance of the building as it stood alone, but also the degree of edge, the degree of space connected the school and the terrace. Do you agree with that?
The space between the school and the terrace would have been occupied by the retaining wall and the belvedere. So the sense of it being a space in the terms of Rus and Urb, I think, is not really correct. It would have been a built feature, and the natural landscape would be visible above that.
No, in fact, the natural landscape comes down to this, right round the side of the railing, to the front of the railing, and wrapped right around to above the gateway, the doorway, the only entrance that there will be into the hotel for all goods and chattels. So it does come right round. and it is part of the Regent Gardens, which is mentioned, that you mentioned in your precog with Calton Hill and Regent Gardens. So it was very much part of the context, not even the wider context, the close-in context of the school building and One Regent Terrace and the terraces thereof. So we don't end up just with a retaining wall.
No, but the development's not affecting, obviously, anything out with the development site. So the area of gardens will remain unaffected.
That is true, but the gardens were there to frame the Thomas Hamilton building, and they could have made the gardens much bigger. The site was close to the terraces, and that was always to be the case because the terraces were there first. Do you agree with that?
The gardens were there. They're not part of the setting or the immediate setting of the Hamilton building. Its setting is the Belvedere Tower and the retaining wall. So I think there are two elements there that are getting a bit confused.
But don't you regard Calton Hill and Regent Gardens as part of the setting? It comes into the precognition. Is it 2.2 that you mention as part of the GDL, that you're aware of Calton Hill and Regent Gardens? And in fact, Playfair designed these gardens. The gardens are all part of, that edge is actually fundamental. The way they designed the edges of these gardens was fundamental to the building and the coming around between One Regent Terrace, if we want to look at it the other way around, and the school. Yes,
and there's going to remain a gap there. I'm struggling to say anything further on that.
My argument is that the gap in itself is important, and that there was an eastern playground, there was a space, and then the gap. That's what Hamilton intended. And the gymnasium sits right back. It's almost, the front of the gymnasium is almost in line with the boundary walls of the gardens. What's going to happen, particularly in Scheme 2, is the building comes right to the fore, almost. So all connection will be lost between the school and One Regent Terrace, which will be hugely affected. I realise you argue that that's not your remit to measure, but it's absolutely affected in every way.
I think the gap between the two things is really best appreciated from a longer distance view. So we've obviously looked at a lot of those already from places like the Radical Road and Arthur Seat and so on. And there will remain a gap. Admittedly, it's a different form of gap. The gap is formed by the new wing, but there remains a gap between the Hamilton building and Regent Terrace, and so the design will remain understandable.
The gap, because they were both the school and the terrace. When the terrace was built as a platform for the school, we've mentioned topography. It aligns exactly with the height. There is no difference in height as you walk around the school and move into the terrace. The front of the school comes to to its boundary, as do the front of the houses, because of course there's no garden in front of the houses. They're on the street. So there's a direct walk around, and the gap will most definitely not be obvious between the school, and certainly in Scheme 2, and One Regent Terrace. The gap will be filled. There will be no gap. It's the gap that's intrinsic.
In terms of trying to understand the design and the layout, I understand there's not an actual gap because there's a new wing there. But in terms of being able to understand that layout, there is still, in effect, a gap. It remains possible to understand the difference between those two elements. It's not fair to say that it's all going to be conjoined. It remains possible to see those different elements as separate things.
Sir, I must say that speaking personally, I'm finding it very difficult to understand this evidence, perhaps in the absence of any visual material to illustrate what gap the witness is talking about. And maybe
Well, I think I was understanding it, but although you haven't been taken to a document, Ms Tweedy, if you would find it helpful to use an illustration or a plan to refer to when you're answering, you should feel free to do that.
The best document would be, and I'm sorry I don't have the reference number, would be the aerial view that completely shows you the hill. You can see then the degree of gap. But actually,
I was going to take the witness to CD 157 in re-examination, actually, if that assists at all. I think that's the one to which...
Is that the one I'm talking about? Yeah.
I think so.
Right. I think we've ascertained our position on that. I was going to move on slightly now. Anyway, if that's okay.
That's fine, unless Ms Tweedy feels she must.
I'm happy, thank you.
Okay, Ms Nimmo.
You also mentioned, again with Scheme 2, that the west and the east wing will become the same height, but you don't specifically mention the fact that the quantum of development moves from the west to the east wing. That there's a significant difference between Scheme 1 and Scheme 2 in the quantum of development. And you talk about notional symmetry, but surely, which is important to us, surely the notional symmetry is not prevalent in Scheme 2 because so much quantum has moved from the west to the east that it skews the sense of symmetry to the original Thomas Hamilton building.
Excuse me, could someone help with it? Is there a similar visual to 157 for Scheme 2? Can anyone help me with that?
There is, sir, and I'm just struggling to remember the number, I'm afraid.
Let's carry on, but if anyone can identify that, it might be helpful. Sorry to interrupt. What was the question again?
Sorry, it was about notional symmetry, particularly with respect to Scheme 2, where so much quantum of defence, not so much the height, but the depth and the width has very heavily moved from the west to the east new build blocks, which I believe has the notional symmetry, and from the Thomas Hamilton building. You lose the sense.
The reason why I consider the notional symmetry to be a benefit currently, when you look at the site, again, this particularly occurs from the longer distance views. The gymnasium block is disruptive of that notion of symmetry, so that the Hamilton building is obviously intended to be symmetrical, and the gymnasium block is disrupting that idea. So by the change and by the two wings being notionally roughly symmetrical, they're helping reinstate that symmetry, make that much more clear and readable. It helps reinstate the prominence of the Hamilton building, which at the moment is somewhat diluted by the gymnasium block.
The gymnasium block, though, does sit far back in the site. And how can it possibly be an improvement to... We've already heard from Mr Innes that the new build on that side is significantly higher, and there's more build on the east side than the west. That how can that be even an improvement on the gym, which we're not fond of, to symmetry? Surely symmetry means something similar, and in fact both wings are now vastly different.
Well, the term is notional symmetry for that precise reason. They're not identical, but by having two similar wings, it's obviously more symmetrical than having the one gymnasium block, which is disrupting the symmetry.
Right. And then going to management change, which is document 502. I should know that by now. Page 9. This is my last question. I just wanted to ask why you didn't seem to assess the value attributed to a historic asset by a community or a wider public who are influenced from the sensitivity of its setting, when it's very obvious that the local community have been objecting from the very beginning, and that there has been a very wide level of public objection to proposals 1 and specifically more for 2, and that's obviously attributed a value, and you haven't assessed that value in your assessment. At least I can't find it. I wondered why you hadn't done that.
I think the assets that we're probably referring to, they're all graded as at least high or very high in the assessment. So I can't attribute them anything higher than that. And I'm aware of the background and people objecting. Obviously, objections happen after I've written my assessment, so I can't actually factor in an objection.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms Nimmo. Mr Steele, would you prefer to take your re-examination before or after our break?
So I think it would be a more efficient use of time if I did it first, because then we could have our break saving at probably 10 or 15 minutes.
Perfect. Let's do that.
I don't think I'll be that long. You'll be pleased to know, Ms Tweedy. Firstly, if we just deal with the issue of Regent Terrace, which obviously is a legitimate and proper concern, first, simply because it's fresh in my mind and I have the documents in front of me. Could you look, please, at 157? And while that's been brought to you, the question is this: does that illustrate graphically the points, or some of the points at least, that you were trying to make, or indeed were making?
Yes, you can see the gap between the wing and Regent Terrace.
And can we also see the landscaping, which would be untouched, to the south, yes, of the proposed hotel wing?
Yes.
Now, at the present time, of course, there is the gym to the north. How close does that come to the eastern boundary wall?
It comes up to the boundary wall.
And at the point that it's at the boundary wall, can you recollect how many stories that is at that point? If you can't recollect, just say so. I'll take it from another witness. But can you give us an approximation?
I'm not certain. I suspect it must be 2 or 3 because it covers the entire Belvedere Tower. So it must be a certain height.
Are you aware of the proposals that the Trust have adjacent to Regent Terrace?
I have not looked at them in detail.
Well, I'll take that from another witness then. Now, could we look, please, at document CD 31? And this is in relation to the point that was being put to you, Ms Tweedy, looking from east to west towards the pavilion and the main building, the main Hamilton building. If we look, please, at 17, view 17, what do we see in between the pavilion and the portico?
In the baseline image.
I'm so sorry, in the base image, yes.
The backdrop is there is a tree, and there's also St Andrew's House and part of the retaining wall of that complex.
And given the materials that are used, is it particularly easy to discern the difference between the pavilion and the portico and main building?
No, all the materials visible are similar.
Would it be fair to say there's a blurring of what is at the Hamilton building and what actually is St Andrew's House
Sir,
behind?
that is a direct and leading question. Perhaps it could be rephrased.
Well, I'll put it another way. How easy or difficult is it to discern the difference between the portico and the main building, given the materials?
The presence of St Andrew's House is jumbling the picture, so it's difficult to determine from this location which things belong to which building.
If we turn the page, please, to the proposed development, does that make that issue easier or more difficult to discern?
In some respects, it is easier. The new development can be picked out readily because of its different materials, but the pavilion is still backclothed by St Andrew's House.
But the gap between the pavilion and the main Hamilton building has our hotel development behind it, is that so?
Yes.
And does that make it easier or more difficult to discern the gap and the difference between the two structures?
Easier, I would say.
Can I ask you to look, please, at the position in the opposite direction? Could we go, please, to view 24? Now, firstly, is this an example of a view of the eastern building from a location further west than was put to you yesterday by my learned friend, Mr. Innes? Is this an example of one such viewpoint? You'll recollect yesterday he put to you a particular viewpoint on further east on Waterloo Place and asked you if there were any viewpoints of the eastern development from a location further west.
On Regent Road. Sorry, I'm objecting to the question. I was specific about Regent Road. I wasn't talking about anywhere, because obviously there are wider views, so the question's not correct.
Well, apologies, the fault is entirely mine. Is this an example, then, of a viewpoint further west than the main building, looking towards the east hotel wing?
Yes.
And at the moment, as between the pavilion and the main building, what do we see?
The gymnasium block is visible in the gap between those elements.
And is the gymnasium block skylining or not?
Yes, it is.
And if we turn the page to the montage, and the same questions as before, does that make it easier or more difficult to discern the difference between the pavilion and the main Hamilton building?
Obviously, it's a wireframe, so there's not details of materials, but applying my knowledge from other photo montages, it would appear to be easier to understand that gap.
So if one was interested in legibility of the buildings, would the balance of advantage favour the current status quo or what we propose?
The proposed development would aid legibility.
If you could just go forward, please, to 32B. This relates to questions by my learned friend, Mr. Innes, about views from the viewing platform, as it seems to have been called. Is that a view in 32B from the horizontal viewing platform between the two pillars?
Yes.
And just for completeness, if you go to CD 180, PPA-32C. Is that another such example?
Yes.
So can it properly be suggested that we have failed to take into account views from the viewing platform?
We have taken them into account.
Now, if I can take you back in time to much earlier this week, Ms Tweedy, you were asked questions by our friend Mr McIntosh about the portico, special place, the managing change document and non-visual factors, and he waxed lyrical about the graduation of the pupils going out through the portico and so on and so forth. Now, if that is the context that is important to consider, for reasons which he fairly explained, do we maintain that relationship and that position or not?
Yes, I believe it would be easier to understand because the door will be reinstated in the development.
And do we or do we not retain the two doors onto the street at lower level?
Yes, we do.
And how does that entire concept, without going into the precise details as explained elegantly and eloquently by Mr McIntosh, sit with the concept of an 11-metre wide opening onto Regent Terrace? How does that illusion or memory sit with that proposal by the Trust to have an 11-metre wide opening straight onto the...
I object to the question. This has absolutely nothing to do with the cross-examination that's been undertaken, and I don't think this witness has addressed my client's proposals in any way. If they wanted this witness to do so, they should have led evidence. And this is starting again where I would ask for it to be reopened and I can cross back. This is not the time to reopen this, and I do object. Equally, we may come to the exact width of the opening in due course, but I don't accept that either. So, and it's not onto Regent Terrace either. So, on a series of bases, I object to this matter.
Scale it. I'm happy to substitute the word for about 11 metres wide, but we did have evidence that it was 11 metres wide, which I didn't believe was challenged. If there's a question of inserting the words of a few steps before you get to Regent Terrace, I'm equally happy to do that. But the point, sir, is this, that a comparison must indeed be drawn, and this witness was cross-examined about this issue, and these issues are before you, sir.
Who cross-examined Ms Tweedy on this issue?
Mr McIntosh cross-examined her about the portico, special place, graduation, and the concept, etc. And he took her to managing change, document CD52, non-visual factors.
In order to assist, whilst that is one, whilst Mr Steele has repeated the substance, I think quite a lot of the substance of my cross-examination, I was very careful to talk about how the exit from the building would be perceived from the portico in the form of non-visual matters, and the idea of how it would be perceived and how it's the non-visual element of managing change. The matter's entirely for you, but just to assist, that's what I recollect I was trying to do. And I do remember Miss Tweedy pointing out to me that, of course, it's one factor and it has a particular weight, and she gave some evidence about that. So just to assist, that's what I was certainly trying to do. Whether I succeeded is a matter for you.
I think you should move on, Mr Steele. We don't have any direct evidence, as far as I'm aware, from Ms Tweedy on the Trust proposal.
I'm happy with that, sir, if you prefer me to take it from another witness.
Perfect.
Thanks, sir. Take you, please, Ms Tweedy, to viewpoint 27A.
Which document, Mr Steele?
Well, in truth, it doesn't matter. I happen to be looking at CD 199, but it's the principle rather than the detail. And Ms Tweedy, I'd like to take this from you very briefly, because you've been asked many questions about it. In the existing situation, am I right in thinking that there is a lodge house or gatehouse, and behind that, if that were removed, a classroom block?
Yes.
And do they or do they not obscure the view in a generally easterly direction towards the main Hamilton?
It would improve the view.
And is the net effect of that to be seen, which in very grainy fashion, to be fair, shows that we will be able to see a part, or possibly even a substantial part, of the main temple structure?
Yes, that is what's shown.
And if one moves slightly to the left or slightly to the right, will one see to a greater or lesser extent parts of the north facade of the original Hamilton building?
Yes.
Now, do you say that is beneficial or adverse in terms of the views from or about this particular point?
That would be a beneficial effect.
And how important do you say that benefit is?
My understanding is that this view was important in Hamilton's original design intentions, to have that sense of arrival as you walk up the slight slope within the site. So revealing that again would be a large benefit.
Thank you. And it has been many years since such a view has been achievable, is that so?
Yes.
And if one goes up, crosses the road and up the roadway, Carlton Hill roadway, would one also get a view of the north elevation not currently available at this time due to the gatehouse and classroom?
Yes.
And insofar as when one arrives at the viewing platform, has one then passed the classroom block and the advantage? I'm happy to leave this to the site visit to get the precise details, but that advantage has then dissipated.
I would need to visit the site to 100% confirm that.
But can we agree this for a certain portion of that journey, for however long we can determine at the site visit, there's an advantage by the revealing of the north elevation?
Yes.
Finally, this, Ms Tweedy. Historic Scotland, our Millennium friend Mr Mackay, on their behalf, suggested to you that framing the main Hamilton building by the pavilions was the intention of Hamilton. Do you recollect that some very considerable time ago, days ago?
I have some vague recollection.
Well, I noted it carefully. Does that therefore mean, partly according to Historic Scotland, that framing the main building is consistent with Hamilton's original design concepts?
Yes, it was framed by the pavilions and the playground areas.
So if that's correct, does that mean that all we are doing, to a greater or lesser extent, is following Hamilton's original design concept by framing the buildings, including the pavilions?
Yes, we're retaining the notional symmetry which Hamilton intended for the site.
And would that not be consistent with the apparent design concepts as spoken to by or on behalf of Historic Scotland?
Well, sir, I object to the underlying premise to this line of questioning, which also is highly leading. Historic Scotland will be giving evidence late, and it's Historic Environment Scotland, of course, we should use the proper terminology, first of all. The witnesses for HES clearly will be giving evidence later in the inquiry. You will have your own notes as the way in which that line of questioning was put to the witness, very carefully, which may be different from what Mr Steele has taken from it. But in any event, if he wants to ask questions about an issue that I raised in cross-examination, I have no difficulty with that whatsoever. But he should be careful about the way he does it.
I hoped I was being careful, and if I wasn't, I can only apologise, sir. I was merely reading out the notes that I took at the time of the precise question as I heard it. Well, I'm obliged for that guidance. I appreciate that. Thank you. Now, Ms Tweedy, if we only had one wing, would that be consistent with the intention to frame the building, the Hamilton building?
No, it would detract from the symmetry and also potentially the prominence of the building.
Does it follow that if framing is important, there would require to be two wings?
Yes, I believe so.
Fine. Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr Steele. And Ms Tweedy, you can have your glass of wine tonight, perhaps.
Even at lunchtime, perhaps.
Okay, we'll break now for 15 minutes, so until 11:25, when we'll hear from Mr Van Grieken.
Sir, the intention is to lead Mr Gibb, the architect, next. Unless you direct otherwise, I intend that the witness should read his precognition. That's for two reasons, sir. One is, as is evident, a vast amount of work has been done by all the experts here, and I think it's only fair that you should briefly, publicly read out a summary of the work that they've done. And the second, from a practical point of view, I suggest it may be useful for a witness to be entitled to read out to settle into his chair and seat and microphone and so on. This is relatively brief. It's only going to take a few minutes. It pales into insignificance in terms of the time with cross-examination, sir. So I would like to do that unless you direct otherwise.
You're right to a certain extent. It does pale into insignificance, although I think Mr Mackay was right. I was timing the reading of precognitions, and it is taking around half an hour. I'm happy for Mr Gibb to read his, but given the slow progress that we're making, could you give some thought to perhaps directing your subsequent witnesses to certain sections of the precognitions?
I can certainly do that, sir, but this is a particularly brief one, and I don't think there's a rebuttal in this one, so I can't imagine it's going to take 30 minutes.
Okay, let's crack on.
Mr Gibb, could you read your precognition, please?
My name is Gordon Gibb. I'm an ARB registered architect and now director with Hoskins Architects. Referring to the reporter's guidance note for inquiry session 1, my evidence will cover topics 2 and 3, architectural design quality and impacts on the listed building itself. Hoskins Architects has provided architectural services to the appellant since the 2009 announcement of the City of Edinburgh Council's competitive dialogue process for the former Royal High School site, and working alongside our practice's founder until his death in January 2016, I've been the project architect on the proposed hotel development since October 2011.
And the reason, of course, that you're giving evidence is because of the unfortunate tragic death of Mr Hoskin himself, who was personally responsible for this project. Is that so?
That is the case, yeah. As a practice, Hoskins Architects have a well-earned reputation for working creatively and skillfully in heritage settings, in particular through a series of significant public competition wins. Our approach to design continues to embody Gareth Hoskins' ethos, that is to demonstrate integrity and quality in all our work and deliver great architecture that benefits the built environment. My inquiry report is presented as compelling evidence of this approach. The appellant's hotel proposal was selected by City of Edinburgh Council as the winning entry in the 2009 competition, intended to find a sustainable and robust commercial business solution for the buildings at the former Royal High School. The architectural designs developed for the planning permission and listed building consent applications addressed by these appeals have their roots in this winning proposal. Throughout the design development periods for Scheme 1 and Scheme 2, the architectural design proposals were refined and adjusted in order to balance economic, heritage, visual impact and townscape concerns so as to deliver the sustainable commercial business required by CEs. Within the planning context in which the schemes were developed, both designs are successful solutions that prevent some of development necessary to deliver on this challenging site. As the evidence contained report makes clear, each of the accommodation being proposed in both schemes is specific to a World Hotel and is both unsuitable and unsustainable for any other than the luxury end of the hotel market. Lower and mid-market operators require substantially more rooms to support the being provided by these two. 3 of my report application consultation process was undertaken for the designs prepared for both schemes. Hoskins Architects listens and responds to all opinions expressed and engaged with stakeholder dialogue in a meaningful way. This included feasibility workshops, public exhibitions, Architecture and Design Scotland design forums, and numerous presentations and consultations with interested parties. I consider our design process and the pre-application engagement undertaken for both schemes to be exemplary and believe my inquiry report provides evidence of this.
Now, have you or your practice ever known of a proposal which has involved so much public consultation, by which I also include the design workshops and the like?
No, for our practice, this has been by far the most significant.
Thank you. Paragraph 9.
Architectural design quality. Our practice's open and flexible approach to the design process is also undeniably demonstrated by the substantive changes that were made to our emerging architectural designs during the Scheme 1 pre-application period, as well as the reappraisal of the design that took place during the gestation of the Scheme 2 application. This responsiveness was recognised and welcomed by, amongst others, Edinburgh Urban Design Panel and Architecture and Design Scotland. And the process by which this contributed to the resultant high-quality design work is set out in Section 3 of my inquiry report. I draw specific attention to the written guidance Hoskins Architects received from David Leslie of City of Edinburgh Council at the conclusion of the 2014 feasibility workshops. CEC advised the design proposals for the Royal High School site would be expected to address 7 key principles.
If we can just take these key principles as read, because I know we'll be returning to them time after time during the inquiry. Paragraph 11, please.
With one notable exception, I remain strongly of the opinion that the designs of both schemes meet the requirements of these principles and as such should have been recommended for approval by CEC Planning Department. With reference to point 4, development needs to be pushed back as far as possible. I, guided by Andrew Wright's heritage statement work, am convinced that the development against the rear retaining wall of the site would be detrimental to the setting of the Thomas Hamilton building. To advocate such a development strategy is, in my opinion, to misread the significance of this important place in the Edinburgh townscape. In this matter, I rely on the evidence of Andrew Wright and Professor Robert Taverner under Session 1, Topic 1. In responding creatively to the guidance and comments received during the Scheme 1 pre-application period, Hoskins Architects succeeded in achieving the required balance between stakeholders' apparently competing aspirations for the site. It is noteworthy that in their appraisal of the project, A&DS considered the 7 CEC principles to have been largely addressed. A&DS also considered that the proposals carried the potential to enhance the city setting, including the approach from Waterloo Place. They noted that the quality, extent and exploratory nature of imagery presented had been highly informative, giving a clear idea of what is intended and a strong commitment to the visual qualities of the proposals. This commitment to visual quality has continued in the extensive number of photomontages produced by Hoskins Architects to aid understanding of the emerging design ideas and by specialist consultants for the requirements of the environmental impact assessment. This resulted in the production of 40 photomontages for Scheme 1, prepared in accordance with Landscape Institute guidelines for landscape and visual assessment, and described by CEC planners as a comprehensive visual analysis. Despite the inclusion of additional views requested by CEC to illustrate the smaller Scheme 2, our approach and commitment to quality was called into question by CEC, noting that the Council did not consider that the photomontages submitted presented the worst-case scenario in terms of demonstrating visual impact. I do not believe representing the worst-case scenario to be an appropriate criteria for anyone genuinely seeking to understand the likely impact of the proposal, and I refer to the evidence of Mark van Grieken in this matter. Following this decision of CEC Development Management Subcommittee to refuse consent for Scheme 1 in December 2015 by 8 votes to 7, our Scheme 2 design work began with a focus on landscape capacity and visual impact. This work sought to establish agreement on what changes could be made to the Scheme 1 hotel proposal in order to mitigate its adverse impact as perceived by CEC and HES. The overriding objective was to respond positively to the planner's summarising comment that, put simply, too much building is proposed. At this time, CEC Planning Department issued a massing analysis document offering advice for the first time graphically on what development might be possible on the former Royal High School site. Unfortunately, the advice offered took little cognizance of the research and analysis carried out by the appellant's design team. It therefore succeeds only in illustrating how damaging for the site a development strategy would be if generated by the narrow criteria that new development should follow the general layout of the existing ancillary buildings on the site. Throughout the pre-application design period, it was clear that the west end of the school site was seen by many stakeholders to be significantly more sensitive to change than the east end. But I am clear in my view that this attitude to the site should not preclude there being a balanced disposition of new development on both sides of the Hamilton building, one that respects Thomas Hamilton's carefully conceived concept for the site, embraces the principles of notional symmetry, while acknowledging the capacity of the landscape to absorb change. Both Scheme 1 and Scheme 2 are presented as appropriate, successful design responses to the challenges of this important site. In developing an approach to the massing of the design, Hoskins Architects paid particular attention to how the new built forms could respond positively to the topography and landscape of the area. By allowing the natural forms of Calton Hill and the Salisbury Crags to inform the design of the hotel wings, the new architecture can contrast with the classically composed Royal High School and be subservient to the centrepiece rather than extending it. This contrast in form, height, elevational design and materials between the wings and the Hamilton building is the result of a deliberate, carefully considered design process undertaken to achieve design quality of the highest order. Creating a clear contrast between the old and the new is an approach supported by the guidance contained within Historic Environment Scotland's document, New Design in Historic Settings. Other parties have noted disagreement with the notion that the chosen approach to scale and massing maintains the feeling of a landscape setting. My response is that there has been no attempt to suggest the wings would merge with the hillside to the point of invisibility, or that the designs when built, would appear to be anything other than bold, creative pieces of contemporary architecture. The point being made is that the proposed scale, massing, form and materials of the new wings, contrasting with and complementing the architecture of the Royal High School and Regent Terrace, the proposals successfully avoid the creation of a stone-built terrace setting for the Hamilton building when viewed from the south. The Scheme 1 design proposes a west wing that responds positively and confidently to the scale of St Andrew's House, and in doing so, the height and form of the two buildings would frame the view out to Salisbury Crags and the Old Town exactly where the view finally reveals itself. The Scheme 2 design, in seeking to address CEC and HES concerns regarding scale and massing, responds to the urban context in a different way, but I believe no less valid. The building form steps away from St Andrew's House, presenting a less impactful gable form to viewers approaching from the west. The reduction in footprint of the amended form allows existing Hamilton design boundary railings and stone piers to remain in situ, as well as retention of the original landscaped area to the south of that boundary wall. Whilst acknowledging that there exists differences of opinion as to how much new development can satisfactorily be accommodated on the site, it is difficult to reconcile the patently stronger objections to Scheme 2 from stakeholders such as CEC and HES, when that proposal clearly demonstrated a reduced impact from many key viewpoints. Both schemes represent site-specific design responses. They are designs that could not be proposed for anywhere else. They are very much of their place, architectural designs of the highest quality that respond positively and imaginatively to the spirit of the place. As such, many stakeholders within the planning processes for both schemes acknowledge the quality of the architectural design. Though objecting to the proposals, Architectural Heritage Society of Scotland noted the architecture is undoubtedly of high quality. And the architectural design quality of Scheme 1 was described by CEC planners in the committee's report thus: the architecture is clearly a sophisticated response to the site's sensitive context. These comments on the architectural design quality of Scheme 1 played a critical role in the decision to retain the architectural forms, language and detailed elevation treatment when coming forward with the revised Scheme 2 proposal in 2017. Impact on the listed building. The building fabric interventions proposed within both Scheme 1 and Scheme 2 look to minimise works, only impacting on the existing building where it is deemed to be of a conservation benefit or an essential functional requirement of the hotel use. In considering each element of intervention, Hoskins Architects sought to retain as much existing fabric as is possible. It should be noted that Scheme 2 proposes significantly fewer interventions than Scheme 1. In particular, attention was focused on minimising alterations to built fabric that would be visible from Regent Road and reducing works in the lower ground floor level of the Hamilton building. Thomas Hamilton School design presents many challenges when attempting to find a sustainable, viable, long-term solution for the building. The most challenging aspect being the almost windowless south facade. There is an obvious aspiration within the two schemes, as there would be with any chosen use for the building, to take advantage of the spectacular views to the south. However, our hotel designs ensure the windowless character of Hamilton's facade is maintained with no alteration proposed to the Regent Road elevation of the building. Access to the bedroom wings is obviously of critical importance to the operation of the hotel, and this needs to be afforded without a change in level between the guest lifts and the hotel entrance. The proposal to achieve this in Scheme 1 employs glazed links that connect into the east and west gables of the Hamilton building. In forming these essential circulation routes, Hoskins were careful to ensure as much existing fabric as possible would be retained. This results in a connection between the old and new that is simple, refined and bespoke in its detailed design. The principle and detail for how the bedroom wings join the Hamilton building at the upper ground floor level in Scheme 1 was considered by CC to not respect the integrity and composition of the Hamilton building. While it is my opinion that this architectural detail was well resolved, it is noted that the Scheme 2 design proposes a different solution of quality and architectural merit. The Scheme 1 design seeks to minimise excavation works and thereby risk to the building by proposing only modest new spaces further north than the existing accommodation. The arrangement of these lower ground floor spaces is such that existing foundations and likely areas of bedrock are avoided, again minimising risk and unnecessary cost. This excavation work, creating additional space under the Hamilton building, would also allow the provision of publicly accessible facilities at the lower ground floor level and an entrance into the building from the front terraces. In reviewing the Scheme 1 design, in the context of reducing impact on the listed building, the appellant agreed that the lower ground floor public spaces need not be provided. In order to mitigate risk to the building fabric and to minimise all alterations to the Hamilton building, the Scheme 2 design locates only back-of-house service facilities within the existing footprint of the Hamilton building at the lower ground level. As described in Section 3 of my inquiry report, both the Scheme 1 and Scheme 2 designs were developed, analysed, refined and presented using accurate computer-generated 3D modelling and visualisation tools. In developing an understanding of the site and the potential impact of the hotel proposals, Hoskins Architects assessed the immediate setting of the Hamilton building as viewed from in and around the site to have equality of value with how that setting is perceived from more distant vantage points. That is to say, an appreciation of the building at close quarters, the terrace it sits upon, its accompanying rear retaining wall, should not be adversely impacted simply to safeguard a perceived value of views from the south. In locating the new bedroom wings, the design team were concerned not just with the impact of views from across the Waverley Valley, but also how a viewer's reading of the school site from its more immediate environs would be impacted. It is for this reason that I strongly disagree with those who would allow new development to be located against the rear retaining wall of the site. The existing gate lodge, classroom block and gymnasium are all detrimental to an appreciation of Hamilton's school site when viewing his building from numerous viewpoints. Yet stakeholders such as CEC and HES have consistently refused to acknowledge this, as evidenced by the CEC planning advice confirming that an area extending the footprint of the classroom block has the potential to support new accommodation. Building here would completely destroy the relationship between the rear of the Hamilton building, the rear retaining wall and the approach from the west, a relationship already impeded by the gate lodge and the classroom block. It's clear to me that this advice demonstrates a presumption against any new development at the west end of the site that might be visible from long-distance views from the south. I believe this presumption restricts the evolution of a coherent architectural strategy for sustainable reuse of the Hamilton building. It is also clear to me that the perceived detrimental impact is consistently overstated in the CEC and HES assessments of the change in view from these southern viewpoints. Adverse findings from a number of southerly viewpoints relate to the perceived loss of view to hillside. The value of areas of landscape viewed between the Hamilton building and neighbouring buildings is also consistently overstated. This approach results in CEC describing the space between the St Andrews House and the Royal High School as being designed, when in fact St Andrews House did not exist when Hamilton was laying out the school. It is true to say that infilling Hamilton's playgrounds with sandstone-clad buildings that would coalesce and thereby diminish the primacy of the Hamilton building would be detrimental to the special character of the site. However, it is incorrect to conclude that as a consequence of this, that no new building should be acceptable. On the contrary, I consider that the new buildings set away from the Hamilton building will provide visual separation to respect the setting of the principal listed building and the views of the composition of the monuments on Carlton Hill. I believe both schemes represent carefully considered, sophisticated architectural responses to a challenging site, and this is clearly illustrated by the visualisations. In views such as from Radical Road and Queen's Drive, the new wings do not dominate or detract from Hamilton's building, and as much as they obscure some hillside, the overall impact is not to create a ribbon of development that visually connects the Hamilton building with Regent Terrace. In these views, the Hamilton building remains the distinct central focal point. In the assessment of many views from the south, I believe the effect of existing buildings is consistently understated. St Andrews House is a huge building. It coalesces with the Royal High School in a number of views. It competes with the monuments. It screens most of Carlton Hill from North Bridge, and yet it is rightly, in my opinion, considered consistently to be a fabulously successful building in the Edinburgh townscape. The value of specific local views from an arbitrary fixed viewpoint are, in my opinion, given undue weight when they are in reality experienced dynamically. So, for example, I consider the value of the views to the Old Town from Carton Hill Drive are overstated. People will experience this road either on their way up the hill, facing away from the glimpsed views of the Old Town over Hamilton's boundary railings, or on their way back down, where they've already experienced a much more rewarding view of the Old Town than can be seen from the rear of the Royal High School site. It is, in my opinion, illogical to place equal value on every glimpsed view across the city. The importance of a place, a view, and experience in a historic city must be assessed methodically. Value can't be attributed arbitrarily. The former Royal High School site is a uniquely important building within the Edinburgh townscape. It is rightly lauded as a masterpiece and one of the best examples of Greek revival architecture in the UK. With no viable use having been found for the building since the school moved out in 1968, there is a very real risk that the building could be left vacant without a sustainable future. This is not a tenable scenario for such an important building. Both Scheme 1 and Scheme 2 applications propose a world-class hotel representing an exciting yet realistic opportunity to reintegrate Thomas Hamilton's building into the daily life of the city and provide heritage, economic and social benefits that have been lacking for half a century. The architectural design approach taken improves the current setting of the Hamilton building, providing the whole site with a well-considered development solution that both respects the historic building and provides the hotel with elegant, efficient and exciting new accommodation that integrates skillfully with the townscape of the area. The dynamic forms of the proposed bedroom wings were welcomed by many stakeholders as an innovative response to the specific site conditions presented by the Hamilton building and its Carlton Hill setting when first proposed in 2015, and I believe both proposals meet all the criteria by which they are to be judged. The historic building and its site are provided with a confident piece of contemporary architecture that successfully integrates with its unique setting and that will mature well over time. I acknowledge that the original Hamilton building must retain its prominence on the site. Indeed, it is essential for the successful operation of the hotel. The architectural expression of the new wings to either side of the Hamilton building is bold and contemporary, while at the same time ensuring that the wings are visually recessive and subservient to the category listed building. It is made clear with the supporting visual and heritage. It's made clear within the supporting visual and heritage impact chapters of the environmental statement for both schemes and in the evidence of Andrew Wright, Professor Taverner and Professor Murray that the wings succeed in this regard. The proposed designs do not seek in any way to finish Hamilton's building, rather they look to introduce new buildings in a contemporary architectural language that complements the Hamilton building as the focal point within the site. In developing a notionally symmetrical proposal, the intention has never been to complete the Thomas Hamilton design, but to respond to the opportunity of the site in a balanced way. This conclusion is also supported by the project's heritage impact assessment based on a sophisticated methodology evolved from ICAMOS guidance, which objectively considers the impact of the proposal on the outstanding universal value of our heritage site from every important viewpoint in Edinburgh. This being the case, the appellant and the design team present these hotel proposals as appropriate sensitive design responses to the challenge of finding a long-term sustainable new life for this historically important site. Both schemes are, in my opinion, examples of an architectural design of the highest quality, and as such I would ask that both are granted plan permission and listed building consent.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. No further questions. Thank you.
Thanks both for that. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, sir. So I'm proposing to start by looking at a number of the drawings with Mr. Gibb. I've got paper copies. I take it that Mr. Gibb will have access to paper copies. One of the problems is that the print's very small, and I think if one's trying to do it on screen, using the Zoom facility, one can see and just about read some of it, but it may be helpful at some stage to look at the physical copies.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. McIntosh had mentioned this the other day. Perhaps we should have said more widely. We do have the paper copies, but it would be very useful for us to know in advance which of those we're going to be asked to refer to. It may take us a little while to find them.
In that case, good morning, Mr. Gibb.
Morning.
I take it that although you weren't directly involved in all the design work from an architectural point of view, you are familiar with all the drawings and that you're the best person for me to ask for explanations.
I am.
Well, to give you an idea of where I'm going, I want to look at the first 3 layers in schemes 1 and 2, principally to highlight the differences and to consider how the respective buildings would be used, where the pedestrian flows, the visitor flows, and so on would be, so that we can get a feel of how these two would operate. So if we could start, please, with CD 96.
So it may be useful to be given a list, and then we could prepare that to speed the process up, if that would help.
What I'll be looking at is CD 96, 97, 110, 111, 112, and 131 for Scheme 1, and 226, 227, 228, and 243 for Scheme 2. Now, just to give you a clue what I'm doing, Mr. Gibbs, the first two, 96 and 97, are the demolition plans for the basement and the lower ground floor, so working up from Regent Road. And one of the things I'm trying to explore is just how the design copes with the rise from south to north. In other words, the Regent Road entrances and the principal guest entrance, which I understand is on the northern facade, and at the same time, the similar rise in the site from west to east. So there are 2 rises that have to be accommodated, and it's just trying to picture how all this fits into those 2 changes. So starting with 96, and looking, for example, at the Hamilton building itself, first of all, if you look at the left of the 2 entrances from Regent Road into the Hamilton building, am I right in understanding that those are existing gateways?
Yes, that's right.
And if a pedestrian came in from Regent Road through either of those gates, they would then use external staircases, or they would use staircases to get up to the higher levels and to get up to ground floor level at the northern facade. Working their way through the building.
To the southern facade of the building. No, you said northern, sorry.
I'm so sorry. We're at the southern facade. Yes. And to get to the northern facade, you'd have to go up 2 levels.
Yes.
So you could enter here on the northern facade, go up 2 flights of stairs, work your way through the building, and come out at the northern facade.
Yes, so in Scheme 1, the 2 existing gates on Regent Road afford access onto the front terraces within the Hamilton site. And from the front terraces, at what I refer to as lower ground floor, you will be able to access the Hamilton building. On accessing the building at that lower ground floor, there is then internal staircases and lifts that will take you up to what we refer to as upper ground floor, which is the main assembly room floor plate.
So sticking at basement for the moment,
yes.
And someone going in through the left-hand gate, directly facing them there's an area of horizontal hatching. Am I right in understanding that that represents material that's going to be removed?
That's correct. So through this gate, that area, which currently has what looks like former service ducts poking out within it, that area of fabric is taken back, and that allows a lift to be inserted that will take someone with that can't manage stairs in from Regent Road and up into the lower ground floor foyer.
And it was just to be clear about what that material actually is that's going to be excavated. Is it just service pipes and so on, or is it rock, or is it, what is it?
It's there is some service ductwork. There will be some masonry below that removed to create that level access into a lift at that street level.
So if one imagines walking down, one will be walking down a corridor with a lift at the end of it.
Correct.
And am I right in understanding that that lift would only go up one floor?
That's right.
You then have to walk somewhere in the lower ground floor to find the next lift to go up to the upper ground floor.
Yeah, I mean that's shown in our proposed plan. It's in front of you.
We'll
I'm sure we will. Yeah.
To get the feeling of what's happening.
That's right.
down
Yeah.
here.
So that's
right.
just up one level.
Right. Am I right in understanding that there's no other significant work proposed at this level to the Hamilton building?
Yes, that's right.
So could we move over to the East Pavilion? And apart from various red dotted lines, which I think are showing downtakings, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
The principal new work would be to the east of the East Pavilion, where an existing door near towards the eastern end of that, what's shown here, at the moment is a single door, which we saw earlier in some photographs, and that will be made into a larger door for vehicular access. Is that right?
Yes, so that's correct, yeah. The East Pavilion has some internal partition downtakings. It's currently a electricity substation. And to the east of that, to allow vehicular service access within the site in Scheme 1, there is historic fabric removed, that door as you've mentioned, to create a larger opening for that.
I think you mentioned the electricity substation and that that's going to move into the ground floor of the East Pavilion. We'll see that in a minute. In addition to making a door big enough for vehicular access, am I right in understanding that there's going to be a new door slightly to the west of it for pedestrian access?
Yes, that's right. There's a niche within the existing fabric that will be of which a new door will be created below. So that's staff entrance with vehicles next to them.
So we've got the vehicular servicing entrance door, the big one, and then a staff entrance. Would that be the exclusive staff entrance door?
Yes.
And thinking about the vehicular access, am I right in understanding that we'll see this in the basement, but the idea is that there'll be an underground garage, effectively, to accommodate service vehicles?
That there will be an area, a loading bay, or whatever you describe it, for vehicles within the site, yes.
Below ground?
Yes, at that street level, which back into the site is below ground.
In that case, could we move on to the next demolition drawing, the lower ground one, CD 97. looking at the main Hamilton building, do the solid wall lines represent existing walls?
Yes.
And where it says Hamilton building, it's in a white square, and there are a number of white squares around it, with the number 4 just above. Can you tell us what's happening in those areas?
Can I just refer to another drawing while I'm...
By all means. Glad you're finding it confusing too.
Oh. Sorry, I missed that.
No, I'm sorry. I was just saying I'm glad you're finding it confusing too. I find it tricky.
I just want to make sure I answer correctly.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you tell me which other drawing you're looking at?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at our proposed floor plan. ALPL 111.
Do you have a document number by any chance?
CD 111, I think.
Thank you. So these areas are there's currently no usable accommodation within these areas. They're essentially foundation substructure areas underneath the house.
Can I ask, sorry, Mr. Gibb, sorry to interrupt. Is that the sort of vaulted area that we
no,
were
so
in on the site
you can't. I'm being asked about the areas along here.
Yes.
The vaulted areas you can access are within these hard line existing spaces. So the proposal in Scheme 1 is, if you like, north of the existing vaulted spaces, there is accommodation created by excavation below the Hamilton building that is above at that point.
Because at the moment all that ground is supporting structure above.
Or
most of it
is. That's right. The dashed red lines on that drawing 97 indicate substructure walls and general lines of foundations two walls above.
I think most of the other demolition work on this level is pretty much internal and not of particular significance. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. The Hamilton classroom spaces were subdivided by PSA works in the 1970s, and a lot of that is what you see in red being taken out.
Right, thank you. In that case, could we move on to CD 109?
Sorry, I missed that.
Sorry, 109. No, I'm terribly sorry. Not 109, 110. And we're going back down to the basement again. And I think we're looking at what it's proposed to put in the place of what we've looked at in the demolition area.
I have that.
Right. So we're seeing the basement level of the Hamilton building, which is just as we saw in the last one. But to the right and to the east, we're now seeing the ground floor of the pavilion and the basement of the proposed east wing. Is that right?
The accommodation shown to the east the pavilion and the new wing are all on the same level.
Yes. But am I right in understanding that what we're looking at here as the basement level of the east wing will be substantially, if not wholly, below ground?
Yes, wholly below ground.
Wholly below ground, thank you. And now we can see the service lorry. Does it mean that it will have had to reverse in?
It does.
Yeah. And then I think everything else, this layer is essentially service for the hotel.
That's right, yeah.
And there is nothing to the west because the west wing hasn't come out of the ground yet.
That's right.
Could we turn then to CD 111, please? That's starting with the main building, and we're at lower ground floor level. So do we now see what is proposed to put in the place of the material that's being excavated directly below the northern facade part of the temple?
This shows the new accommodation being proposed. None of it's on the northern facade of the temple. The facade is further back. It's been deliberately kept south of that line.
Does the area marked cold kitchen, is that below the facade or not?
No, it's below the assembly room.
Right.
But it's south of and inboard both east and west of the foundations and
Right.
back wall of that assembly room.
Right, I understand. So could you just talk us through what functions we're finding in the main building, that is, the parts of this floor that are under the Hamilton building, as opposed to the wings?
Yes, this is within the Hamilton building. So there's a central lobby with some restrooms to the south, and if you travel east along the Hamilton corridor that I think will have been visited on the site visit, you come to Whiskey Bar within the spaces at the east end of the Hamilton building. If you were to travel from the central lobby west, you come to breakout sitting space and meeting rooms in the west of the Hamilton building. Within the middle of the lobby there is an existing stair. That's a PSA stair that's retained, and mirroring it at the other side of the lobby to the west there's a new lift. Those stair-and lifts would take you up to the main assembly hall floor above.
And just above and to the north of the lobby, do we see a main hot kitchen, ware and glass wash?
Yeah, so I've described the front of house public accessible areas. So behind that thick black wall is the back of house service facilities, as you've noted them there, sir.
Right. And do we also see to the left of the restrooms the lift out of which one would emerge from the new lift from Regent Road?
That's correct.
And how would one then get to the floor above?
So from that lift, unhelpfully not noted on the drawing, if you head straight northwards, you see another square with a crossing it, that is
That's the lift.
that is the main lift. So yeah, apologies.
And turning then to the east wing, on scheme 1, the connection is through the west gable, is that right? Or through the west facade? Sorry, through the east facade.
That's correct.
And one then finds oneself in this layer, the lower ground floor layer of the new east wing.
That's right. The connection corridor is a service corridor. Sorry, staff service corridor. So that takes staff from the rooms that you see within the east wing, uniform, canteen, and the like, through to the Hamilton building, under the Hamilton building.
So broadly speaking, to the north of that corridor are service areas. To the south are spa, fitness, swimming pool, areas that visitors, guests would be going to.
That's correct, though those spaces are accessed from the level above. There isn't a public connection at this level into those spaces.
Well, that's what I was wondering about. There is a physical access, but it's for service only, is it?
At this level, the connection out of the Hamilton building into the east wing is a service connection only. The public spaces within the east wing that you've mentioned are accessed from above, through and down.
So if I was staying, for example, in the west wing, I wanted to go to the swimming pool, I'd find my way to the reception area and then proceed through the corridor arrangement through the east wall of the building and into, well, no, sorry, tell me, where would I go down a level?
As you described there,
Right.
it would be on the floor plan above this one.
Right.
You would come down from your west wing room through the Hamilton building. We're a level above this floor plan, through that building, and then down a stair lift to the fitness facilities.
But there would be no public access along the lower corridor at this level?
No.
But before we leave the east wing, where are we relative to the outside world at this level? Are we below ground, or are we coming out of the ground, or are we above ground?
I think, as you were alluding to earlier, slightly tricky to describe, given the not flat nature of the site.
Yeah.
Right along the north of the site, we are below ground.
Right.
As the existing the floor level of this wing matches exactly the existing floor level in the Hamilton building currently. At this lower level,
Right,
so
right,
as you can see from the rear of the Hamilton building, all the accommodation down at that lower level within his building is not visible from behind. So at the back we are below ground, but the levels within the site do fall to the south. So in the same way that the Hamilton building emerges out the ground, if you're imagining it from north to south. So, for example, the fitness suite that you see at the front of the wing here, that would give out onto a external terrace. So you do have daylight at the front.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Would there be windows?
There would be, and that's what's indicated on the drawings. Although you are below the level of the Hamilton's boundary retaining wall at that point.
So, if I was in the swimming pool, would I be able to see out of a window?
You would see out, but the view would be onto the rather attractive view of Hamilton's boundary wall, I would imagine.
His boundary wall to the south?
Yes, so that's the wall I'm referring to. Has the red dotted line associated with it.
Yeah, thank you. So, moving then to the west wing. Again, first of all, would there be public access to the west wing at this level?
Yes, there is at this level. If someone was to either come down from the Assembly Hall above or in the route, as we've described, to the central lobby at this level, the corridor at the front of the Hamilton building does afford access into the west wing itself in Scheme 1.
And we see, I think, one of the large spaces shown as ballroom. Is this a large function space?
That's correct. So, wedding venue and conference facility and the like.
Yeah. And although we've accessed this as a member of the public from the Hamilton building, one floor down at the east side, am I right in understanding that you could walk in off the street at the west point?
If the operation and management of the hotel allowed it, the building design allows for that. Yes.
Well, I was reading orientation / gallery / cafe. Or would this be intended to be the main entrance for people wishing to view whatever was on display at the gallery, or to use the cafe, or indeed to attend a function or a business seminar in that space?
So there's 4 access points to this level of the West Wing, allowing a number of different operations and uses to work in tandem as the hotel might require, including the subdivision of the ballroom. The dotted lines across it indicate that that could be 3 individual rooms or 1 large space. And if, for example, it was split in 2, you might imagine one group using the foyer in front of the ballroom, accessing that space from the orientation gallery area. The other group could be using the bar lobby and accessing their room within the ballroom from the east. And you can get into that lobby bar area either through the route from the Hamilton building that we've discussed, or through, and I'll admit it's not all that apparent in this drawing, but this is an entrance here to the front of the West Wing behind the Hamilton Pavilion, or you could be coming down from the upper floor of the hotel via the stair and lift at the north of that lobby bar area.
Could you just explain to us how you would get into the entrance you were just pointing out to me? Would you come up from Regent Road, or?
Yeah, through the landscape area. The landscape area that you see in front of the West Wing, that affords hard paving landscaping that would you could use. So where you see the pull-in parking bay with 2 cars situated on it, you could have coach drop-off there with people coming along the front of the West Wing and in behind the pavilion. So,
in short, the design's flexible and it would be a matter of operational requirements?
Yes, that is the case. Although it is the intention that there is a permanent public facility within the far west, that orientation gallery space. It's more street, city-facing than the other accommodation.
Well, that was just what I was thinking. If someone was approaching, coming for a function, or just wanting to have a coffee in very pleasant surroundings, that would be the obvious entrance.
Yes, for a coffee or the like in that gallery space. Yes.
And in phase one, that would be a possible gallery space.
Yes.
It could be configured depending on what you wanted from time to time.
That's right.
Right, could we go up one, please, to the lower ground, or sorry, the upper ground? Which I think's 112. Again, if we follow the same approach and look at the Hamilton building first. Do we now see the main entrance from the north, through the northern facade, into the reception hall?
That's correct, yes, I see that.
And is that where we would find...
The camera is, sir. Can I take Mr. Innes is responsible for this?
Absolutely deny all responsibility.
It was Innes, though.
So hopefully we're back to normal, Mr. Gibb. In the reception hall, you would find, I take it, check-in and check-out facilities, concierge, that sort of thing.
That sort of thing, yes.
And then on either side of the reception hall at the north, there's something called the Link Gallery.
That's right, yeah.
Is that a new area behind, well, tell me what it's behind.
It is. That's currently space external to the Hamilton building on the north elevation. And these are, glazed link galleries affording access east and west from the reception hall.
And thinking of the photographs we've looked at, is that where the solicitor wending his way home was walking?
Those are visible in that image, yes.
And just while we're on the north, perhaps we just look at the main access of how you get to the hotel entrance. The principal way of getting there is from Waterloo Place or Regent Road, no one's quite sure which. I take it there's vehicular and pedestrian access.
That's correct, yes.
Segregated?
Not in this plan. It's shown more as a shared surface here.
And the little rectangular spaces numbered 1 to 6, what are they?
They indicate the accessible parking spaces that would be provided.
I think on one of the plans I saw a little wheelchair sign. Might they be disabled parking spaces?
That's what I meant by accessible, yes.
Sorry. Thank you. So if someone's being dropped off by taxi, say, would there be plenty of room for the taxi to turn and go out again after dropping someone at the main entrance?
Yes, that's right. There's turning space for that.
And then moving to the east from there, there's this general tapering going on as we start going behind the east wing.
Yes.
And just before we get there, I think we see a new entrance in the rear retaining wall, which enables someone to go up 3 flights of stairs and out another opening in the wall above onto the path up to Carlton Hill.
That's right. I think, as was mentioned in other evidence, there was a shared aspiration from the start of the project that the site improve and afford better access to the hill. I'd note another requirement for that staircase, though, because in developing the proposals, we spoke with the fire service in relation to how they might fight fire in the east end of the site. There's guidance on how close the fire tender needs to be in order to successfully do that, and the proposal agreed with the fire service is that to access the east end of the site, they would park on Carlton Hill Drive, use that stair for access to the site, and then, because they have a presumption against any arrangements that require them to reverse their vehicle, they would go up onto the hill, turn and come back down again. That's why access up the vehicular entrance at the back and then requiring the tender to reverse was not deemed appropriate.
And then I think there would be fire exits from the east wing onto that pathway as well.
That's right, yeah.
And again, someone walking along that pathway, which seems to get a little bit narrower, they'd pass the Belvedere, down a few steps, and the path would then bring them round to the front of the building again.
Yeah, I think the intention isn't that the space south accessed by that little staircase referred to is public. That would be staff only.
Right. So the public access would end at the Belvedere.
That's right.
And then back again, right. I should have mentioned that there's an area marked terrace with a slightly squidgy shape to the, well, in the area of where the vehicular access is 2 floors down. What level is that at? Is that terrace at this level or the level below the lower ground?
So you're looking there at the roof of the lower ground accommodation, so that is at this
Is
floor
at this
level.
level?
Yeah.
Thank you. And similarly, the green area to the south and west, the linear rectangular area, is that at the same level?
No, that's an area of landscaping in front of the front terraces at the lower ground floor level.
One down.
So that's, and the area is currently grassed, and that sort of sloping down to the front Regent Road wall.
And so far as the east wing is concerned, we're completely above ground now, and we're in bedrooms and we're looking out all round.
Yes, that's right.
And there I think we see the lift shaft, which would enable us to get down to the swimming pool. At the
yes, at the far
west
of the east wing, yeah.
Thank you. Now, turning to the west wing, am I right in understanding that at the east end of the west wing, we're at the same level as the reception hall?
That's correct.
So we could walk straight from the reception area along and into this bedroom layer of the west wing.
That's correct.
But by the time we get to the west end of the west wing, we're on the first floor level, because the pedestrian access is at a level below from the street.
Well, I think that's why we refer to this as the upper ground floor, because it is the ground floor of the Hamilton building when accessed from the north. It's a level above the access to Hamilton building if you're accessing from the front terraces. So, that does mean that at the west end, this upper ground floor level is above you.
So for someone walking along the entrance pathway from the main entrance to the west to the hotel entrance, they're walking up a gentle slope and walking from ground floor street level for the west wing up to one floor above, which is the access level for the hotel entrance.
That's right.
And do we see that in CD 131? Which I hope is the sectional view of the north facade. And we can see some little graphic people making the journey from the main entrance at the Waterloo Place end up to the main entrance to the hotel.
Yes.
And they're walking up the side of the lower ground level of the west wing.
Yes.
And we've heard evidence about the materials that are going to be used for the external surfaces of the east and west wings. But could you tell me what the material is that's sort of grey coloured and is behind the little people at ground level?
So it's glazing. The glazing, if you like, you'll see goes sort of full height. So there are areas of the glazing that run past floor levels, floor slabs or ceiling voids. So that glazing would be although glass, it would be opaque, so you couldn't see in it.
Sorry, can I just clarify that? So as you walk up from the lower ground floor towards the entrance at the back of the Hamilton building, everything in that lower ground level is glass, is that right?
Yes.
But opaque glass.
Some of it opaque, some of it.
Well, I can imagine that it might be clear glass at the cafe gallery far west end.
Sorry, I was referring to the bedroom.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I meant lower ground. I'm getting that wrong. Lower ground is the entry level from Regent Road, Waterloo Terrace. Is that right?
Sorry, my apologies. So at the lower ground, the glass is at the cafe at the far west of the site, but what you're looking at up the slope towards the Hamilton building at that level is a stone plinth.
Thank you.
Sorry, did you say stone?
Yes.
So it's glass, some opaque and some transparent, and then stone.
This element here is stone.
And
the bedroom accommodation glazed in copper element sits above that.
colour of stone?
It's noted in the drawing as natural stone cladding. The drawing indicates it to be a buff colour, but that would be presumably determined by condition.
And then just before we leave this, do we see the glass connecting corridors, tubes, whatever we like to call them, between the new west wing and the edge of the Hamilton building?
Yes, I see that.
And will they be clear glass?
They will be clear glass, and this drawing indicates that they meet the Hamilton building with I describe it as a copper sleeve, but a lower copper-clad element that fits into the window reveal of the Hamilton building.
Well, with all that in mind, can we move on to Scheme 2, please? And starting with 226, CB 226.
I have that.
Here I think we've jumped straight to the basement level of the proposed Scheme 2. This is the first thing we see looking at the Hamilton building itself, that there's no longer a new corridor and lift.
That's correct. So the area of the Hamilton building that in Scheme 1 that lift was affording access to is in Scheme 2 not publicly accessible.
So in Scheme 2 there's no public access to the lower ground floor. Is that right?
That's correct. There was a change in approach for Scheme 2, partly as a result of looking to minimise interventions underneath the building. So as we'll see in the floor above, there's a lot less accommodation provided there. The accommodation within the Hamilton building at lower ground is for staff only, and if someone was to enter the site from either of these little gates, I guess as was the case with schoolboys, the gates would afford access to the front terraces, but not into the Hamilton building itself at that level.
And as a matter of curiosity, what happened to the whiskey bar? Where has it gone?
There are many other spaces that serve whiskey in the hotel. So.
But it's gone up a level, in other words.
Yeah, it's no longer identified as a separate facility.
So does that mean that the only public access to the east and west wings in Scheme 2 is at upper whatever it's called, level?
There would be the option to access the west wing from the west front terrace. We can see that in the floor above if we go to it.
Right. But there wouldn't be public access to the Hamilton building at that level?
That's correct.
Turning then to the east wing, I think we can see the substations moved into the lower ground floor level of the East Pavilion.
I think that's the same location as Scheme 1, yes.
So I meant moved in from where it is at the moment, again. And looking at where there was vehicular access and a new opening, am I right in understanding that we've now reverted to as is? There's only one door, and it's the door that's there at the moment.
That's correct.
And is that still the staff entrance?
Yes, that's correct.
So how does servicing take place? How does the food get in and the laundry get out, or whatever?
Via trolleys through that opening with vehicles on the street.
And is there any particular or special lay-by proposed, or where are these lorries going to stand?
There is, sir, that formed part of the application.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, there is that did form part of the application.
But that's what's intended. There will be a new lay-by, or it will just sit on the street as it stands at the moment.
The area of hard standing and pavement and road in that area would be adjusted for that purpose.
And again, are we looking at a purely service area of the building, and again below ground?
That's correct. All service and all below ground.
And again, there's nothing to the east because we haven't got up to there yet.
That's right.
Could we move on then, please, to CD 228. Sorry, 227. The lower ground. And at this level, do we find significantly less accommodation on the footprint of the Hamilton building because the excavation to the north hasn't taken place on Scheme 2?
That's correct. The areas that you see outlined in black correspond with existing spaces within the building.
And the other significant change at this level, I suppose, is that the access to the wings has now moved to the north facade from the west and east.
That's correct. So neither the east nor the west facades are impacted by the fabric is not impacted by either of the developments. So the walls that you see coming off at 90 degrees from each of the elevations at the north are the existing where the existing Hamilton wall meets his own elevation.
Yes, and to the east, the access that you're pointing to at the moment is below ground, is it? At the lower ground level?
Yes, it's below ground coming into the floor level of the Hamilton building at that point.
Yeah. And thinking about the east wing, is it the same situation that it's below ground at the north, at the back, and it's coming out gently of the ground at the south?
That's correct.
Are there any significant differences that we should be aware of so far as the internal layout of the east wing are concerned?
The general arrangement of accommodation is similar. The type of facilities, spa, pool, fitness suite, treatment rooms, they're in a slightly different. They're in a different configuration, and access to those spaces is via this central lift and stair arrangement that you see within the middle of that wing.
Right. So someone wanting to get to the swimming pool from the reception area would go through the connecting corridor at that level, go into the east wing to about the middle of the east wing, and then go down the lift there.
That's correct.
And turning then to the west wing, again, fairly similar layout. Is there any significance in the fact that the cafe's been dropped from gallery foyer?
There isn't, actually, sir.
just checking.
There's no intended difference to the use of that space. It is, I think, a smaller space. The whole wing itself has been reduced in size here. That now means that the west end of the west wing sits further into the site, and we retain the Hamilton boundary wall and railings in front of that to the west. The general arrangement of the spaces there within are quite similar.
Yeah. And although there's a corridor tube link from the main Hamilton building at this level, am I right in understanding that it wouldn't be used by the public because there's no public use at this level of the Hamilton building itself?
Yes, so the link along the north side of the west wing there and then connecting into the Hamilton building is a service staff link so that the staff can serve the ballroom and other facilities within the west wing.
And perhaps for completeness, you could just tell us about the access points at this level. So am I right in thinking that there will still be the principal access from the west tip at Regent Road, Waterloo Place level? Are there any other entrances on this layout in addition to coming down from the floor above in a lift, presumably?
To come from the floor above here, you would be using the lift in the middle of that you can see in the middle of the plan. Right. But the primary access in Scheme 2 for all this accommodation is from street, either via the gallery foyer or along the front of the west wing and into the entrance behind the pavilion, offering that ability to split the accommodation and have two entrances.
So that entrance is still there. There's just one in the middle that we've lost. Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you. So, can we go up one more level, please? to the upper ground, which is 228. Thinking about the Hamilton building itself first, are the uses at this level almost, if not completely identical to the ones we looked at in Scheme 1?
Yes, that's right.
So the fine dining and so on are exactly the same size, same location.
They're using the same spaces within the Hamilton building, yes.
And do we have the same pushing forward to create a new space on either side of the main temple building at the north?
Yes, the link galleries exist in this Scheme 2.
And the external treatment, again, is the same there?
The external treatment is slightly different in Scheme 2 from Scheme 1. In Scheme 2, we link into the Hamilton building from east-west, and with these link galleries, using the same architectural expression of glazing and copper elements as the wings generally. In Scheme 1, the elements that link to the Hamilton building were almost exclusively glazed.
Now, if someone has come into the hotel through the main entrance and wants to get to the ballroom, the only way of doing that now, as I understand it, is to go along through the new link gallery, through the, is it a glazed tube, into the west wing, and find a central lift and going down one.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And the same person who wants to go to the swimming pool would do exactly the same thing on the other side.
Yes, that's right.
And there'd be no option of going down inside the Hamilton building and then moving sideways. It would have to be at, the initial move would have to be at the upper ground level.
Yes.
So how about access to the external terraces? How would that work? How would you do that from the reception area?
They can't be accessed from the reception area in Scheme 2. The front portico at that level is the accessible terrace for the Scheme 2.
Right, so you just go out at that end onto what's shown here as the terrace?
That's correct, yeah.
What about the lower areas on either side, the lower terracing areas? Is there any access to them?
No, they're not. They're not accessible from here, and it's not proposed that there would be any public access afforded off the front portico. The boys that were asked to do that on their last day, on a wet Edinburgh day, were taking the life in their hands. You would need to add in a lot more balustrading and railings to make that a safe route. Hamilton clearly didn't have access or safety in mind when he so brilliantly configured those staircases.
So thinking about the what I think were called terrace areas on the previous Scheme 1, to the east and west of the Hamilton building, slightly disformed parallelograms, which I think we saw were called terraces. How would you access them in Scheme 2?
They would be accessed from Regent Road. I think it's fair to say that would be a operation and management issue. The scheme affords access to them from Regent Road. For example, the west front terrace could be a special route into the west wing for bridal party or something like that.
So turning to the north and the main access from the street, from the Waterloo Place Regent Road end, is that virtually unchanged from Scheme 1? We see the same 6 disabled spaces.
Yeah, I mean, there's no significant alteration there.
Looking to the east, where I think there are still the steps up, where there was a new opening in the retaining wall, the openings at both ends seem to have gone in Scheme 2. Is that intentional?
No, I mean, I think my reading of the drawing is that we are showing the opening at the top of the stair, though not at the bottom. That's just at the level at which the plan is showing it.
But it would still be the intention to create openings in both walls.
Yes, that's correct, and there is a detailed drawing within the application of that opening in the Hamilton's wall.
And again, would the pedestrian experience moving to the east be similar towards the Belvedere Tower?
It would be similar, yes.
And again, would it stop at the Belvedere Tower?
It would, yes.
And finally, on the drawings, Mr. Gibb, could we look at the corresponding elevation, which is CD 243. To see the treatment of the difference in levels between the west end of the west wing and the east end of the west wing. Sorry, 243.
243?
Yes.
We've not got the same drawing, but I do have 243.
I'm terribly sorry.
(243) I have as a rear portico.
Well, as they say, sir, this might be a convenient point to return for lunch. While I try to find the right drawing.
I was about to ask. OK, we'll break now until 2 o'clock. Just to let you know, we're managing fine with the drawings on the laptop so far. So that's okay. Good. How much longer do you think you'll be with
I would hope about half an hour, just moving on to some questions once I finish doing this.
OK, 2 o'clock then.